Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us today with our continued series on HVAC and COVID and things that we can do to try to battle this virus in our communities. Now, certainly, as we all know, that there are a few factors that have remained exactly the same throughout this crisis, and that's that this virus is largely spread through large respiratory droplets that we expel from us when we talk, sing, shout, and aerosols that we create when we do the same. And in some ways, in certain types of environments, these aerosols can hang around, and HVAC are tools to help mitigate the spread. They're not the only tool, but when we add that together with all the other things that we're getting used to in understanding, especially face coverings, we know that that cuts potential transmission between two people by about 70% if we're both wearing those, keeping that social distance and practicing good hygiene. But today we're going to focus in with the Board of Water and Light in Lansing on how some of the things that we've talked about in our HVAC webinar series, which you can find on our Michigan Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity YouTube page, can help mitigate some of that potential indoors. And we knew, as we talked early in the year, that when we headed into fall and winter, it's going to be more challenging with COVID. And the reason for that is that we're congregating more indoors. And that's why you've seen some workplace rules like remote work policies for office type environments, trying to space out people at work, or even in bars and restaurants with seating capacity and other limitations that we've been enduring to try to mitigate that spread of the virus by avoiding congregation. Next slide, please. Now, a few of the things that we've talked about in our HVAC webinar series include the concepts of ventilation, filtration, and humidification. First, more air changes per hour is better. It works to help make sure that the virus isn't able to build up in the space that we might be in, and that if we can improve our air changes per hour, we can probably decrease the probability of that spreading if somebody in there happens to have COVID. And you can see our friends from ASHRAE helped us with these next couple slides. They're the engineers on refrigeration, HVAC, and otherwise, on how just some more air changes can really lower that probability. And you can see once you get to 2 or 4 or more, the probability of spread continues to go down. And the reason for that is it doesn't allow the virus to concentrate in a load that's large enough to get you sick. If you are looking at other ways or other things that you can do, you can look at filtration. Next slide. And you've heard in the news a lot about MERV ratings. That's the efficiency rating of the filter itself and what size of particles it can take out. We've all heard of HEPA filters. You can get them for your vacuum or otherwise. Those remove 99.9. And if you think of MERV ratings, HEPA is sort of the top. And then there are different ratings all the way down the chain. In your house, you might have MERV 8s. That's just largely going to take out some dust and pollen and a few other things. But some systems can go up. And in some of the studies and CDC guidance, if you can get to a MERV 13, it's important that you understand if your system can handle that, because there's a lot of components to a system. If you can get to a MERV 13 or higher, that's getting to a filtration level that is significant enough to pull out the size, even smaller sizes of the virus if it's lingering around and moving through your HVAC system. Next slide. And then finally, something very difficult here in Michigan, we have humid summers and very non-humid winters that we have to endure. And if we can keep our humidity between 40 and 60%, that's kind of like the sweet spot for all types of viruses and bacteria where it's really not able to flourish. And one of the things that these aerosols do when we expel them is they need something to ride along, and that's typically going to be water vapor. So as you can see on this graph here that ASHRAE built for us, when that virus is able to attach itself to a more humid environment, it's going to fall to the ground quicker. That social distance, that 6 feet, gravity is going to help us get that virus down to the ground, which is why we also talk about hygiene because of surfaces. Now, as the humidity starts to decrease, you can see that the particle is able to get smaller and smaller and potentially linger around and hang around for quite a while. So when we're looking at things that you can do, certainly look at those air changes per hour. It's winter. That means you're probably going to have to heat more. We're going to look at that filtration. We're going to look at humidification if that's possible. That's probably going to be a more difficult one for most places. But one of the things that we've also highlighted on these HVAC series is that many utilities, BWL included, have energy efficiency programs. So if you think about trying to increase your air changes per hour, you might be talking about moving from a single speed fan in your system to a variable speed fan. Typically, those types of changes will qualify for some type of incentive or rebate or other programs that are out there. So we have with us today Patrick Walters from BWL, who helps spearhead this program for them to really dive in deeper. Mainly today is about BWL and to talk about the things that they do to help in the energy efficiency space. And then you should be able to see how some of that might overlap with some of these things that you can do in your place of business or your workplace to help mitigate the spread of COVID. So I'll turn it over to Patrick, and thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Sean. I appreciate the intro, and really I am here today to discuss BWL's Hometown Energy Savers programs. You may recognize us as maybe a residential type of program, but we also are working every day very in-depthly with our trade allies and with contractors and licensed professionals throughout our service territory. So some of you might partner with Consumers Energy. We don't have, I guess, as stringent of rules to be able to partner with us as they do, but we also kind of work with them since everyone who is a BWL customer is also a Consumers Energy gas customer. So just keep that in mind. It's one thing I'll kind of highlight later on in the discussion. You can always look for rebates from both consumers and BWL when you're performing these types of changes. So again, the vast majority of projects that we do are rebates for Energy Star LEDs. So that could be changes of T8s and T12s over to LEDs, high bay lighting reductions, down to your A-line and decorative lighting upgrades, as well as LED exit signs too. So if you have any older exit signs, you can get about a $20 rebate through BWL for replacing those. So we've kind of been in the outdoor protective lighting area a lot for the past 10 years or so, and that's really, how we kind of got into talking about safety and how we got into talking about some other areas where we can help benefit customers. So I've got it kind of broken down here. That's how you might know of us, but how you could know BWL are through HVAC and control incentives. So we've got incentives available for new HVAC systems that kind of replace an older system. So that can be high efficiency absorption chiller. It could be a variable speed drive or a variable frequency drive, like Sean had mentioned, that would go in your air handling unit or a furnace or what have you. Again, and the way that that's going to help you with COVID is, again, bringing in more fresh air. Typically higher efficiency equipment requires more air changes per hour to be able to function properly and to be able to really handle the air in an appropriate way that doesn't leave you with any carbon monoxide or anything like that. They just naturally are devices that pull in fresh air. So I don't know if anyone is familiar with like a high efficiency unit at their home. Again, you've got the separate pipes going out to the exterior that bring in fresh air, and that's exactly the kind of thing that we're talking about, just at a higher scale. So if you could flip to the next slide, please. How you should know us are through what are called custom projects, or what we refer to as custom projects. And essentially the way that those would work, it would be an incentive for anything that saves you kWh on your electric bill, or a potential customer that you're working with on your electric bill that isn't listed on our rebate form. A really good example of this would be, it's called a dynamic air handler that we installed, or excuse me, a dynamic air filter that we had installed with a very large customer of ours in our service territory. The rebate for that, and keep in mind this is a $500,000 project just for the actual equipment that was installed, we were able to get them a rebate of $50,000 back for that equipment. So that would be, going back to what Sean had shown you, that would be a MERV 14 filter. And that's for a very large building in our service territory. So again, that pays for about 10% of the entire install cost, minus labor, of course. of the device and the racking, and making the changes to the actual HVAC system. So it's something that we had seen before. We hope to see more of them again, because projects like that do help BWL to hit their own energy efficiency goals. And so we have goals that are set for us by the Michigan Public Service Commission through a number of different pieces of legislation. And really, we have to go out and kind of find these projects and encourage people to, go out and install a dynamic air filter, because it could actually save you a lot on your electric bill. And in this case, it's a really good place for there to kind of be some synchronizing between COVID priorities and energy efficiency priorities. So it's always great when we can kind of, let's say, hit two targets with one shot. So other things that you might be thinking about too when you're considering an upgrade like that would be just, I guess, maximizing the efficiency of your ducting system. So there are a lot of old buildings out there with old air handling units, old furnaces, old chillers. It's always a great time to look at replacing and renovating your ducting. Consumers Energy is actually the one who would provide you with an incentive for duct. It's called air infiltration on ducting. They provide an incentive there. So certainly reach out to Consumers Energy when you're doing this kind of project. Again, to get the maximum rebate value that's out there and available to you. But again, if you're looking at a chiller replacement or something, it would be a great time, since you've already got your trade ally or your licensed contractor coming out to your location, to talk to them a little bit about the new technologies that are out there, right? So everyone is going to have to replace a chiller at some point, and it might be a good time to ask your trade ally about some of these new technologies that are coming out. So, and again, similarly, if you are a trade ally, you're touching base with the customer, why not try and maybe sell them on something that's going to also increase their safety and increase, work productivity for healthy, happy people that are going to be coming back into your office post-COVID. So the other thing I wanted to mention and throw out there would be compressed air system improvements. So I know a lot of customers, at least in the Lansing area, industrial customers, are looking at doing system audits of their compressed air systems to make sure that they're functioning properly, they're functioning efficiently. BWL is actually starting an engineered nozzle program to help cut down on efficiency losses from the air that kind of just comes out the end. We wanted to provide customers with a nozzle that can kind of reduce some of the flow on that compressed air. So again, compressed air contractors, they are out there, and certainly they're looking for more business. So it's possible, if you are interested in, say, a UV light for a lobby or something, might be a good opportunity to ask them about new technologies that have come along with COVID. So if you want to flip to the next slide, please. Again, all of our recommendations and all best practices are really coming from ASHRAE these days, as Sean had kind of mentioned. So when we give a recommendation, that's definitely in line with ASHRAE's best practices. They do partner with the EPA, OSHA, and the CDC, as I'm sure you've heard before. So I just wanted to say that we kind of work with ASHRAE to really provide this guidance to our customers. So, and again, they have an excellent webpage on how to limit the spread of COVID-19, from making sure that you're maintaining your equipment to, again, as Sean had mentioned, maintaining good relative humidity. And really the best way to do that is with a properly functioning high efficiency HVAC system. So again, this all kind of just ties together in that if you are looking to buy a new chiller, you're looking to replace an old air handler, all those are really good chances for a customer or a trade ally to be able to get in there and say, hey, listen, this is how a MERV 14 air filter could, potentially benefit you. And you can also earn a rebate from BWL for doing so. So again, Sean had kind of showed the graph up there, but MER 14 would be what we would recommend to kind of increase indoor air quality and really protect against COVID. And honestly, HEPA, that's going to be the only way that's kind of like foolproof, because again, that is like the top of the line air filter. But MER 14 does catch above 75% of those particles that are, 1 to 0.3 microns in diameter. So if you could flip to the next slide, please. So this is where I kind of plug the programs. So if you are considering any upgrades, I ask that you get in touch with your local trade allies. So they know our programs very well. They know the Consumers Energy programs very well. And really and truly, our energy advisors kind of work hand in hand with the Consumers Energy folks to try and get you the maximum rebate that's possible. Again, as I said, you can earn rebates from both BWL and Consumers Energy. An example of that would be, for instance, if you are changing out a combination, maybe let's take the example of an air source heat pump or something like that. If you're also doing some ducting upgrades, there's a chance you could get benefit along the heating and cooling side, or excuse me, the heating side. So you would be able to earn an incentive with Consumers Energy there. So we also do have an incentive cap about $50,000 per customer per project. So that is sometimes if you're thinking about larger projects, the savings do kind of have to be there, and we do verify things ahead of time. There is a pre-approval process that you would need to go through if you are installing like an air handler or a dynamic air filter, something like that. You would want to reach out to us beforehand. There are financing options that are available. Michigan Saves, for instance, they're a really excellent group. They finance anything from UV light upgrades that are, both the standalone lights that, for instance, you might see at like Sparrow Hospital has them in their little foyer, and as well as the HVAC integrated kind. So they also do other air filter financing. So again, if you are looking at doing a large project and you don't exactly have the capital on hand, Michigan Saves is a wonderful option for really anyone who can qualify. So I just would ask that, again, you reach out to an energy advisor if there is change that you're going to be making to your HVAC system, so we can talk to you about the different opportunities that you would have and kind of encourage you to work with a licensed professional to be able to get that work done in a really timely and affordable and an effective manner. And again, we also have rebates for maintenance. So part of the ASHRAE recommendation was to make sure that your heating and cooling systems are operating up to par. And so we also provide a rebate for chiller tune-up, as well as Consumers Energy provides a rebate for a heating system tune-up. So again, that is just the best way to follow those ASHRAE guidelines for best practices on how to deal with COVID-19. So again, we've got our website here. It's lbwl.com/energy savers, or you can always feel free to give us a call at 517-316-7859. With that, brings me to the end of the presentation, and I'm more than happy to field any questions that might be coming my way.
Sure. Thanks, Patrick. One question for you, from me right out of the gate for our participants today is, if they go to that website, they can also find contractors that are already registered in your program, right? So that's correct. Yeah. So with that, you don't necessarily have to call BWL to find out what rebates apply everywhere. Those contractors are in tune with the program, so they should be able to help you identify those. Certainly don't want to take away from folks calling you, Patrick, but just to let people know that for sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we do encourage you to do all of your own research. We encourage you to, again, use the resources that we have available online. And yes, we do have a list of contractors that's available there. And I want to say it's probably about 50 or so deep at this point. So just people who operate in the Lansing area. Again, Consumers Energy also has their resource. But yeah, we would encourage you to visit our website and take a look at what resources we have available.
Cool. Thank you. So I think Erica will run us through some questions that we received, and we'll just kind of take them the best that we can.
That's right. And the first one we received was from Dr. Kashini from Star International Academy. And the question is, are there any commercial units to adjust the humidity?
Yeah, so there are, I can take this, Sean. There are units available. Again, I would recommend talking to a trade ally that would be in your area, be it either Lansing or Consumers Energy. They're really going to know the best product that would be available for you. I can tell you they do make commercial size dehumidification units in BWL service territory. That would be something we could give you an incentive for. But that said, when it comes to the actual manufacturer of a particular product, we're not exactly allowed to recommend a manufacturer, but they definitely do make, commercial size dehumidification units.
Perfect. And Patrick, the next question is from Tina, and she asks, if a company updated lighting and HVAC in 2020, would the company be eligible for the rebate?
So that is a good question, and it would be largely dependent on when the completion of the project was. So for instance, if you finished maybe at the end of December or so, finished that install, then it would be possible to kind of go back and see what was there before. And really for lighting, it might be a little bit easier as long as you've got an idea of what the old fixtures had been. So really and truly, I would recommend giving a call to that phone number, that 517-316 number that I had listed previously. And I would encourage you to just get in touch with an energy advisor. But typically our programs do run from January to November. And so when it comes to going back to a previous calendar year, it does get a little bit questionable. So again, just please reach out to us.
All right, and you both might want to weigh in on this one. Just an anonymous question asking for your thoughts on UVC induct for COVID removal.
So I'll jump on that one first, Patrick, and feel free to follow up if you have any other thoughts. I can tell you that UVC lights have been around for a long time. They do serve a purpose for removal of certain types of bacteria and viruses and otherwise. I believe that COVID is one of those. One of the things you want to consider with the UVC is, or any UV, is there's a duration that the air needs to move across. So the systems can get quite large depending on how big your area is. And if you are focused in on air changes per hour, if you're bringing in more fresh air, they may not have that much effect because you're essentially clean air coming in. If you're in a recirculation type setup, you might want to consider those more, but some of those MERV filters, if they'll fit, can be quite effective as well. So definitely something to consider. You'd want to talk with the HVAC contractor. If you're just try to think of it as a system though. So if you're, like I mentioned, if you're getting those air changes up, you might not need that. If you're doing some of the other filtration components, that might be overkill, but it might be perfect for your system. But you're, an engineer or somebody should be able to help you with that. Patrick, any thoughts on that?
Well, Sean, I can tell you we have given an evaluation to one of those UV lights in the past, but unfortunately we couldn't give an incentive for it because it was newly installed. And so when it comes to energy efficiency, typically you're talking about a replacement type of thing. That said, what we could evaluate in terms of a rebate would be, for instance, if you have like an older fluorescent UV light that you had been using, if you could find an LED UV light, that would be something where you would be able to potentially earn a rebate there. But that said, I wouldn't be able to, I guess, comment on the efficacy of those. So my apologies there. Yeah,
that's a good point. I think for the premise of energy efficiency, adding those lights isn't going to lower your electric bill, right? So something to consider.
Yeah, especially if you didn't have anything in place beforehand, it's simply going to add to your electric bill.
All right, and our next question asks, if we installed healthy air purification systems in our HVAC system, are there any rebates for this?
Yeah, so again, we had done one. I can't exactly say who the customer was without them disclosing that and allowing me to disclose that. But yes, we did give one for it. It was called a dynamic air filter. And again, it was a rebate of $49,000, and it was a very large building, one of the largest we have in our service territory. So I don't want anyone to think like $49,000 is going to be the overall rebate that every one of these air filters is going to achieve, but certainly, you could look to approximately 5 to 10% of the cost of one of those as a potential rebate for you. So definitely, again, would encourage you to take a look at our website. We have an application that's available on the website. And again, that phone number that I had available would be a really good way to kind of start your process and really ask questions of our energy advisors, who are trained professionals, and they're the ones who are kind of doing the calculations for our customers and visiting them in the field to talk about opportunities that they've got.
All right, and Patrick, another question. Could you just clarify, are these for COVID specific updates, or do the rebates apply across the board?
So they're not, I guess, well, I would say a customer could choose to install a MER 14 air filter for non-COVID reasons. But really and truly, when you're looking at upgrading an HVAC unit, typically that wouldn't happen for a particular safety reason. It might happen because the unit's reaching the end of its lifetime. Certainly, we would still be giving you a rebate for that. So you can really bring any kind of project or any kind of opportunity to the energy advisors, and they can certainly evaluate it and take those on kind of a case-by-case basis. So yeah, now, it doesn't have to be specifically for COVID for anyone to be working with us. We're around before COVID and would like to believe that we'll be around afterwards, but this is a really good opportunity for us to kind of talk to you about some new technologies that you all might be able to benefit from. So.
All right, and Danny again from Battle Creek area wants to know if there are any COVID financing programs for installing new furnaces.
I would just point you to Michigan Saves. So that is actually something that Consumers Energy, DTE, really all of the customers throughout the state of Michigan are able to take advantage of. Again, some of the utilities kind of sponsor it, but unfortunately BWL isn't really one of those utilities. However, our customers can take advantage of the financing program. It's kind of run through banks, and there are, kind of restrictions on like credit scores and things like that. So just I would check with a trade ally. Michigan Saves actually has a full list of their trade allies, and their website is michigansaves.org. So again, they're a wonderful resource. We have sponsored them in the past, but really they're, as an entity, quite impressive. And I think they're somewhat self-sufficient at this point. So they're a really wonderful group of people to work with.
In Battle Creek, the only thing I'd add is not to take any thunder away from BWL. The other utilities have similar programs, and you'll definitely want to check with your provider, because while there are similarities on what rebates and incentives may apply, some do have some differences. So I know that DTE on some of their programs had a 0% financing piece for certain equipment. Consumers has something for some pieces. And then, as Patrick mentioned, Michigan Saves is a great spot to start. And they also have a contractor list available on their website. So does DTE, and so does Consumers, that you can work with that should be familiar with those programs.
All right, I think we have time for just one last question. So what are your thoughts on plasma air products?
So it's early in the plasma air product protocol. I don't know much of the research at this point, but we always just encourage everybody to make sure they understand what the manufacturer's suggestions are, what it is doing, and then do good research to make sure that the equipment, you know, is capable of handling whatever it is they're handling. You definitely want to probably work with engineers on that type of equipment as it starts or continues to develop and be deployed. But at this time, I really don't have any thoughts to share, and I apologize.
Yeah, and unfortunately, we haven't seen any rebid applications from plasma air, anything really. So I wouldn't be able to comment on energy savings from it.
All right, and with that, we are out of time for today. So Sean, if you'll go ahead and close this out.
Absolutely. Just want to thank Patrick and BWL so much for participating with us on this webinar. As I mentioned, we've posted several HVAC focused webinars with ASHRAE, who are the engineers and experts in this space, on some of these things that you can do. It's quite apparent that some of these changes will make your environment better for the long run, and they may also qualify for some of these programs that exist. And if you're considering that, I would definitely encourage you to take advantage of them. We have resources at michigan.gov, COVID workplace safety, prepared by MIOSHA, which includes guidelines, posters, you name it. We have FAQs on some of the workplace rules that you need to follow. This HVAC stuff that we're talking about is a mitigation strategy. It's not the only one though, so you definitely need to keep encouraging those face coverings, keep that social distance, keep the good hygiene, and keep us moving forward as we battle COVID. We see our numbers heading in the right way. We want to keep it that way. The vaccine rollout is happening, and there's light at the end of the tunnel. And I remind everybody, though, it's a long tunnel, so we got a ways to go as we fight to get out of past this pandemic. And I appreciate all the work that you're doing to try to do that. And joining us today is a good step in that direction. Again, take advantage of these tools if you can. If it's not something you can do, that's okay. Practice those other mitigation strategies, and we'll get through COVID together.